I set out near Zurich with a simple plan: cycle to either Lyon or Montpellier. But after 16 days and more than 1,500 kilometers of cycling, I ended up in a completely different place. What began as a focused solo trip evolved into an expansive adventure with breathtaking landscapes. This is the condensed story of how I found myself far from my initial destination and where that road ultimately led. I was really excited to finally start this trip. After 1 hour of riding, I decided to hop on a train for around half an hour. I was very glad that I could skip this section, since I would have been riding through an area with a lot of traffic and industry. The train ride was from Lenzburg to Morgenthal. The plan for the day was to ride along the Aare River all the way to Erlach. Since there was a lot of headwind, the cycling was actually quite exhausting.
I've heard the songs of summer singing, like a humming in June.
At that point I was in Solothurn. The city is framed by the beautiful Aare River. The Aare is Switzerland's longest river that flows entirely within the country, passing through major cities like Bern, Solothurn and Aarau.
I am listening, you are a voice whispering in my head, shining through the bells steady ringing, the words I can't ignore, wide hearts open to.
Yes, I made it to Lake Biel. It's extremely beautiful, but also very windy. And somewhere around here is the Röstigrabe, so I think from now on I will need to speak French. In Switzerland, there are 4 official languages: German, French, Italian and Romansh. The Röstigrabe is an imaginary cultural boundary that roughly separates the German-speaking and French-speaking parts of Switzerland. In English, it would be something like Rösti Trench. Rösti is a dish made from potatoes, which is famous especially in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. Over time, the dish turned into a playful shorthand for the German side of the country, so when people started talking about the cultural divide, Rösti was the most recognizable marker.
I'm gonna stay in Barcelona, babe.
I could just set up my tent in time. I just finished and now it starts raining. As you can hear, it was some quite heavy rain. I was really glad to be inside the tent. Getting wet before the night would not have been nice. When I started riding the next morning, everything was dry again. Starting in Erlach, my goal was to ride all the way to Lake Geneva. The second day of my tour was already my last full day in Switzerland. This shows pretty well how small our country actually is. I was really looking forward to cycle along Lake Neuchâtel. It's one of Switzerland's most beautiful lakes. Lake Neuchâtel is the largest lake entirely within Switzerland, known for its white shores, vineyards, and surprisingly wild wetlands. When cycling along it, it's a bit unfortunate that you often catch only short glimpses of the water, because long stretches run behind reeds and protected areas. I was expecting to see way more of the lake, but I can understand that it's important to protect nature.
Well, I'll be your rainy day lover. Whenever the sunny days end, and whatever the weather, we have each other, and that's how the story will end.
I was now in Yverdon-les-Bains, a very cute small town. It's famous for its thermal baths, a tradition that goes back to Roman times and still attracts visitors today. For the rest of the day, I would continue to follow the National Cycle Route 5. However, as it was late afternoon already, I was pretty sure I wouldn't reach Lake Geneva anymore.
I'll sing. I wanna love you forever, I do. I wanna spend all.
Eventually, I started to search a spot for wild camping. It was already dark when I found one. For dinner, I ate some couscous and chips so that I would have enough energy for the next day.
Thought I'd seen it all till I saw you. London in the fall and Paris too.
Lake Geneva, or Lac Léman, holds around 90 billion cubic meters of water, making it one of the largest freshwater reservoirs in Western Europe. Its shores move from elegant cities like Geneva and Lausanne to quiet vineyards and medieval towns, making it feel constantly different as you travel along it. In my opinion, it's definitely one of Switzerland's most beautiful regions.
Let it go. Everything you left unspoken. Let me know the secrets of our heart wide open. I will never leave your side.
After following Switzerland Cycle Route 5, I was now on the National Cycle Route 1. It's also known as the Rhône route. It follows the river from its glacial source near Andermatt all the way to Lake Geneva. At the same time, this stretch is part of the Eurovelo 17, which continues beyond Switzerland, tracing the Rhône through France until it finally reaches the Mediterranean. By the way, I can highly recommend to use the mobile app Schweiz Mobil if you want to check Switzerland's cycle routes.
Golden halo morning light. Little flower, take your time. Needles thread a joyful line.
Yes, I made it to Geneva, and I have to say it's a pretty special feeling to reach this city. What would have taken 4 hours with the train took me 3 days with the bike, and now I will do the last kilometers in Switzerland before entering France. I haven't been to Geneva for a long time. Coming here with the bicycle is so much more rewarding than just taking the train. Geneva is one of the world's most international cities, home to the United Nations and dozens of global organizations, despite its relatively small size. Sitting at the western tip of Lake Geneva, it feels like a crossroads where Swiss precision meets French influence and global diplomacy.
All is fire, all is storm. All is the clouds move. On and on, and on and on. On and on, and on and on.
When looking at the map, I already rode to Geneva. Now I was about to follow the Rhône to Avignon. I was looking forward to cycling in France. It's always fun to explore a new country. So far, the quality of the cycle path was really good, but there were almost no signs. I was not sure whether I was still on the right path.
To know that I had a leg now with your pain.
As you can see, I was now riding along the Rhône. It has been crucial for centuries as a trade and transport route, connecting inland cities like Lyon to the sea. For many French people, the Rhône isn't just a river, it's a hub for leisure. Boating, fishing, cycling, and riverside picnics form essential parts of life in the French countryside. Cycling in Switzerland is also nice, but France definitely has some advantages. It's flatter, the quality of the cycle paths is better, and people tend to greet more often. One major advantage has to do with the size of France. As Switzerland is much smaller, it's more densely populated. As soon as you enter France, you have more nature around you, which is something I really like.
I believe in a God who loves me well, better than I can love myself, but I can't seem to make sense of grace, and I feel unworthy of your love most days.
The afternoon of day 4 was one of my favorite sections of the trip so far. Overall, the whole day was amazing. Eventually, I found a good location for wild camping and set up my tent there. For dinner, I ate some polenta and Oreos. After a long day on the bike, I was always glad to have something to eat. It was a very beautiful evening and I went to bed early. On the 5th day, I decided to leave the run for a day. On the map, you can see that the run runs north, so I thought it would be easier for me to head west. I didn't want to ride through Lyon and preferred the direct way. That's what led to this decision. Since the weather was amazing, I didn't want to end the trip already and decided to head towards the Mediterranean.
Taller than mountains, you wrapped me so lover, burning with all of your mind.
There was a beautiful campsite at an old farm. For dinner I ate some couscous and dried apricots. My diet wasn't particularly varied. There were even some chickens running around freely, which I hadn't expected.
Wow, look at that sunset. That's amazing. It was definitely the right decision to come here, and now I'm really looking forward to shower. See you tomorrow.
The next day was also very beautiful, but just as windy as the previous one. Unfortunately, I always had headwind.
Look at that. They have to push each other off of the boat. That looks really funny. And in general, it's so nice to be back at the river. It's much more fun like that.
I think what they are doing is called chute nautique, a traditional water sport that exists along the Rhône. It's a historic game where two opponents stand on platforms at the back of boats and try to push each other into the river using a lance. It's been practiced for centuries, especially in southern France along the Rhône and so on. Today it's mostly done during festivals and local events, more cultural tradition than everyday sport.
It's all waiting for you. It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning.
I could finally refill my bottles. There are almost no wells in France, but sometimes you have these water stations. They are quite useful. And look at that. The view here is once again absolutely amazing. It's so much fun today.
In Switzerland there are many wells, but in France there are only few. So on days without water stations, I had to go to a store twice a day to buy water. At least there's always some civilization along the river, and in France some shops are open on Sundays, which is very convenient.
Your eyes are the color of the sunflowers, so radiant, wild and free. And the world stops spinning, I lose track of all the hours. There's no place I'd rather be.
Originally, I was planning to end the trip in Montpellier at the Mediterranean. However, since I had never been to the Côte d'Azur, I decided to extend the trip and head east. I was now on a local cycle route called Via Venezia. It partly follows an old railway line, so there were some long straight sections awaiting me.
I see forever when I look in your eyes. A love that is deeper than the blue in the sky. You are my heart.
At the campsite, I first set up my tent. I had much more space than I needed. As it was end of September, the sun was already setting. For dinner I cooked some spaghetti with pesto. It was really tasty.
Had the world on a string, knew we knew everything, we didn't know it yet, thought we already had, been through the fire, been to the mountaintop.
Yes, as you can see, I made it to the European Cycle Route 8, which I will follow for quite a while now. It's really nice to have such an amazing network of cycle paths.
The Eurovelo 8 is the Mediterranean route. It starts near Gibraltar and goes all the way to Cyprus. I was now near Aix-en-Provence and was heading east to Monaco. There I would leave the route and continue to ride along the coast to Genoa instead of heading north. The Eurovelo 8 is approximately 7,000 kilometers long, so it's much longer than the Eurovelo 17. I noticed right away that the Rhône route has better signage since it's much more popular. But the Eurovelo 8 is also really beautiful, which is the only thing that matters in the end.
Then I looked you in the eyes with the promise, not brighter than the stars. I'll finish what I started. And if you lose your way, you'll know it defines me. In the dark of
Yes, I made it to the sea. That's so amazing. That's the first time ever that I went to the sea by bike. I have to say, this is a pretty special feeling, and it's so beautiful. Once again, the weather couldn't be better.
It was incredibly beautiful, In that moment I knew that all the effort was worth it. It was not only the first time I went to the sea by bike, it was also the first time I visited this coast. The Côte d'Azur, also known as the French Riviera, stretches along the Mediterranean from near the Italian border to the outskirts of Marseille. Its mild climate, turquoise water, and dramatic coastline have attracted artists, writers, and travelers for over a century.
Holding Lake Michigan with your eyes on me. I had my hands deep in the pockets of my blue jeans. I said you could be my Maryland and I will be your James Dean. Well, I knew that you could fix my soul.
When I was riding along the Rhône, the cycle path was usually not next to the road. There were not that many cyclists and almost no pedestrians. On the Côte d'Azur, it was basically the opposite. I really had to pay attention when riding my bike. However, considering how beautiful the coast is, it explains why there are so many people.
Would I be the same if I go down? Am I the one to blame? Oh, what's the point in trying anyhow?
Eventually, I made it to Monaco, the third country on my trip. There was a big yacht event, so the city was really busy. The road I was following is part of the Formula 1 racetrack. It's much steeper than it looks on TV. When I was riding uphill, I got stopped by a police officer who said that I'm not allowed to film. Overall, I didn't like it that much, but being there in the late afternoon was also not ideal because of the traffic. The next day, Italy welcomed me with beautiful sunshine. I was really looking forward to exploring the coast of Italy, which is the second biggest country on my trip. Monaco is by far the smallest country with less than 50,000 inhabitants, followed by Switzerland with roughly 9 million. In Italy there live around 60 million people, in France almost 70.
You don't even have to try. When we touch, the fairy dust makes me wanna fly. I used to be a skeptic, but you're making me believe every little thing you do is magic to me.
It was already time for lunch. I had a really tasty pizza with ham and egg. Of course, I also ate a tasty tiramisu for dessert.
For the first lunch in Italy, I had to eat pizza with tiramisu. The pizza only cost 8 euros. This price is absolutely insane. That's just a third of the price compared to Switzerland.
Eating pizza was a real treat, as the food on this trip had been a bit boring so far. In Switzerland and France, I ate bread for lunch pretty much every day. From now on, I wanted to visit more restaurants and eat some proper food.
We can float along the water from the rivers to the sea. Go and drift away with the tide. We could sweat all through the summer and the winter we could freeze. I'll be there through it all at your side. So go on, leave.
Wow, look at that. It's so nice to enjoy the sea for once. And look at the contrast. Behind me there are some pretty dark clouds, and it's not only today, also yesterday and the day before it was like that.
I sat at the beach and enjoyed the waves for about 1.5 hours. Then it was time to continue. At that point, I was already very close to Genoa, and it was time to say goodbye to the sea. The next day I had to cross a small mountain pass, and there was some sort of car race. The cars looked really nice. I think all of them were modified by the drivers themselves. It was amazing to see how much fun the people had on the side of the road. It was the perfect example of how passionate Italians are. The only problem was that I had to get through somehow. I always had to wait until there was no car, and then I could move on a bit. Eventually I could ride normally again. It was fun to see the event, but I was also glad to be able to cover some distance again.
Summer sun still glows, drinking bars with strangers, separate ways we go, but I still care. Carry you with me, like a friend.
At that point, I was riding through the Po Valley. It's the largest and most fertile plain in Italy, stretching from the Alps to the Adriatic Sea and shaped by the Po River. Honestly, it was quite boring compared to the coast, so I was just trying to cover as much distance as possible.
Your voice, don't hold it back. Say all the things you want. Say all the things you want. Just make some noise. Are you into that? Say anything you want. Say everything you want to say.
The feeling I had on day 16 was quite special, as it was my last day of cycling. All in all, it was a really nice and surprisingly cheap trip. I only paid $500 for more than 2 weeks of cycling. I was really glad that everything went well. However, I must admit that I was often quite stressed because I wanted to stretch the daily stages as far as possible. On the next trip, I definitely want to take it easier. At the beginning of my journey, I never would have thought that I would cycle that far. It was an amazing feeling when I finally reached Lugano, my final destination. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one.